stole the beginning of my story. When I was about 2 years old, my mommy and daddy decided that it was a good idea for me to go to Sunday school. My father came from a very traditional church environment, the Brethren Church in a small town in Iowa. And that was his family tradition. My mother had grown up going to Christian Science Sunday school in Kansas City, but when she was a really little girl, her mother used to take her down to Unity Inn, the vegetarian cafeteria in downtown Kansas City. And so Mom had been going to Unity Inn all her life. My great-grandmother, who lived in Kansas City, was born and raised there, was actually friends with Myrtle Fillmore, because they were of the same generation. Wow. And the same mind. So when I was 2 years old, my mommy tied a quarter in the corner of a handkerchief. See, it's not a hammer. And she walked me up these really, really tall stairs to this wonderful wooden door that looked a lot like that, but it didn't have a window in it. And I went in, and that was called the nursery. And that was Sunday school for 2-year-olds. So I went in and had Sunday school, and Mom and Daddy went to church, and they came back afterwards and got me. And Mom said, "Did you have a good time?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, shall we come back next week?" And I said, "No." But we did. And we came back every Sunday. So yeah, and like my new friend Bill, grew up in Unity. I don't know anything else, but I'll tell you what I learned in those first years of Unity Sunday School. You know, the nursery, then there was 3-year-olds, and then there was 4-year-olds, and then there was beginners, and then there was wee wisdom, and then there was juniors, and then there was truth seekers. Finally, YOU, Youth of Unity. In my Sunday school early experience, the two things that I learned were, number one, God is love. That's the first law of unity. God is love. The second law is, I am a child of God. I am a child of God. Now, I'm very fortunate in that my own daddy was a wonderful, gentle, loving daddy who had the best smile and the warmest hug in the world. So it was real easy for me to make that daddy God thing. I was really blessed that way. That's what I grew up with. When I was about 10 years old, my Sunday school teacher was a lady named Dorothy Latham, who worked in Silent Unity at a Unity Village. It was about 30 miles from Unity Temple, which was on the Country Club Plaza in the middle of Kansas City, out to the village. Dorothy decided that 10-year-olds are old enough to learn how to meditate. But they didn't call it meditation in those days, at least not at that church. They call it the silence. And so Dorothy, every Sunday, took her little band of 10-year-olds, there were about 6 of us, into the silence. We sat in our little corner of the Sunday school room, and she took us into the silence. That's a pretty profound experience when you're 10 years old, because it becomes very normal and very natural to be able to sit and be silent, and to know that feeling of being so deeply immersed in your connection to spirit that you don't perceive the outer world at all. You know, my husband, the famous Reverend John, says meditation starts when you become aware of yourself, God, and the crickets. Mm-hmm. It continues as you are aware of only yourself and God. But you know you have achieved the depth of meditation when all you know is God, and you have disappeared. Now the problem is the minute you get there, you go, ooh, ooh. Okay, so try it. Okay, So, my talk is called What Myrtle Said, because I think that, in my humble opinion, Myrtle Fillmore is the founder of Unity. Charles is the one who kind of did the punt through the goalposts. I mean, he's the one who really launched it into being something that people were aware of. But Myrtle Fillmore was born in 1845 in Ohio. She was the sickliest member of a sickly family. They went to the Methodist church. They were devout Methodists. She grew up bright young woman, fragile health, but very bright. Got her degree in education from Oberlin College in the 1850s. Well, it would have been early 1860s. Took her teaching certificate to Denton, Texas, to teach school, where she met an interesting young man from Minnesota who walked with a really severe limp. He was much younger than she, but they became really good friends. And before you knew it, she and Charles Fillmore got married. And then they moved to Colorado. That's where their first two sons were born, Lowell and Rickard. But Charles was really interested in real estate development. So he decided he wanted to come to Kansas City because somehow he had some connections there. So they moved to Kansas City, and he became a real estate developer. In fact, there is a street in Kansas City, Missouri that is Myrtle Street. Guess who it's named for? So their children were growing up in Kansas City, but Myrtle's fragile health was not improving. And finally the doctors said, you know what, we're afraid you're just not going to make it. You know, we're maybe a few months, maybe a year, but you need to start thinking about, you know, caring for your sons after you no longer can do it. And Myrtle was just like, no, you can't have this happen. So they started going, she and Charles started attending lectures by itinerant speakers who were talking about ideas that were just kind of floating in the atmosphere in the late 1800s. Mary Baker Eddy was founding Christian Science. I'm going to get his name wrong. Ernest Holmes was developing religious science. Lots and lots of what we now call new thought. Ideas were being born. So one night, they went to hear a guy named E.B. Weeks. And Mr. Weeks said, among other things, you are a child of God, therefore you do not inherit illness. And Myrtle went, what? Even though I have always been the sickliest member of a sickly family, I don't have to be that? And that was what changed her life. So, unbeknownst to Charles, she'd get Charles off to work in the morning, she'd get the boys off to school. By that time, their third son, Royal, had been born. She'd get the boys off to school, and she would sit down in a quiet room. You know how quiet the house is when everybody's gone? Everybody goes where they're going, and you're the only one there. Sat down, made sure there was a chair facing her. And in that chair, she imagined Jesus the Christ facing her. She sat for an hour. During that hour, she was feeling the presence of the Christ, and it helped her to visualize him sitting opposite her. She was blessing the life in every cell of her body. She was blessing the wisdom and intelligence in every organ and tissue of her body. And she continued this practice in among all of her other responsibilities, cooking, cleaning, laundry, all that. She was doing her hour a day. I have never meditated for an hour a day. Some of you probably have. She kept it up, and by golly, she didn't die after a few months, and a year came and went, and she didn't die, and a second year came and went. She was just downright robust. And Charles looked at her and said, I don't know what you've been doing, but it seems to be working. Can you tell me about this? And so she told him that she'd been sitting in the silence. And at that point in Unity, it was a proper noun, capital T, the, capital S, silence. She had been sitting in the silence with Jesus the Christ for an hour every day. Well, Charles, I had mentioned, had a shorter leg. He decided that perhaps he could do this too. He could sit in the silence, and perhaps he could balance out his legs. Perhaps that withered leg. It was a childhood skating accident. He grew up in St. Cloud, Minnesota. So he started. Well, come to find out, some of their friends had noticed that Myrtle was really looking good. And what's going on? And so they said, well, come on over to our house because we're going to sit in the silence from 10 until 11 every evening, and you're welcome to come and join us. And that is how the Society of Silent Unity was born. Silent Unity continues to this day at Unity Village, and many of you know that you can call them anytime, day or night, and they will pray with you. If you don't feel like talking to anybody, you can go online and email them, and they will email you back. But there's nothing like hearing that voice on the other end of the phone. When I was an adult by this time, but my grandmother, who had been a Unity person forever, she was in her late 80s and into her 90s. She would call Silent Unity every night because she couldn't go to sleep. So Myrtle Seidenstricker, who was actually named for Myrtle Fillmore, Myrtle Seidenstricker called Silent Unity every night to get that beautiful voice of faith and love and light to help her into that. So what did Myrtle Fillmore really say? Well, she said through her letters, people would write asking for prayer. And she would write back to them. And there's a wonderful little book called Myrtle Fillmore's Healing Letters. And it is so sweet. It really is excerpts from her letters. And they're arranged by topic on silence and prayer and meditation and health and marriage and children and all these topics. One of the things that people would ask her about quite often is, tell us about the silence. What is that? And she would write back and she would say, the silence is the time when you stop thinking and start listening. She said, it is for us to make conscious union in the silence with the all-providing mind. Now notice she is not personifying this as God. She's not, Jesus, the Lord, the Savior. It's not like that. For her, it was sometimes a very impersonal thing, the all-providing mind. It's for us to make conscious union in the silence with the all-providing mind, lifting our thoughts to its standard of truth. Oh, wait, my thoughts to the standard of truth of the all-providing mind. In other words, don't tell God how to bless you. We're lifting our thoughts to that standard of truth. Holding our thoughts in this truth as we go about our own particular duties of living. Can you imagine what it was like for her to finish her hour in the silence and go about her daily chores? Making the beds, doing the laundry, starting the roast for dinner, whatever it was. Serene in her connection. So, Dee mentioned my book. A couple of years ago, my wonderful husband John asked me to write a book. And that book was to be my take on my spirituality. What an opportunity to be given that. And it was going to be used for a 6-week fall study program at Unity Atlanta. So I wrote this book and I named it Life, Love, and Lilies, Everyday Spirituality. at the time that I wrote the book, we lived in a house that had a very steep hill in the backyard. And retaining walls were just not in the budget, so I bought a whole lot of daylilies, and I plugged them in all the way up the hill. And the thing about daylilies is that they are the best hill holders. That's why you see them planted around highway interchanges. Our backyard was beautiful. We don't live there anymore. But daylilies, all different kinds, and lilies, and irises, and all that kind of stuff that you don't have to dig out. You don't have to dig a big hole to plant it, and you don't have to dig it up and replant it every year. So, life. God is life. God is the energy that goes back and forth from the earth to the heavens, through each one of us, through every living being. Love is the energy that emanates around us and through us. God's love is who we are. We are God's love in bodies. And the lilies in the title are all the beautiful creations of God that serve a purpose, that have a function. Now, I'm sure you'll be able to think of some aspect of creation, some creature or plant that does not serve a function or purpose that you value. I can think of a couple. But the point is, life and love work together to create the lilies and us and the sequoias and the mosses, and we share this beautiful planet. The energy that creates that is what we contact when we're in the silence. That's where we go back to the source. So that's what Life, Love, and Lilies is about. There's a whole chapter on life, the energy of life, chapter on love, the attracting power of love, and lilies, the way we show up as beautiful, important parts of the universe. And there's a chapter on everyday spirituality. What does it mean to walk in the world as a spiritual being? Part of that is to carry the silence within you. And as you spend time in the silence, the piece of you that is silence grows, becomes more easily accessible, so that when a circumstance presents itself that is challenging, your power from the silence can bloom, and you navigate that circumstance in authentic power. Not manipulative power, but authentic power. That's what the silence does. So, one of my favorite stories about Myrtle, and it's in the Healing Letters, is that somebody had written in to Myrtle saying, well, it's all very well for you to talk about taking time out for the silence, because you have helpers to do the cooking and the cleaning and the washing up after dinner and so on. And Myrtle wrote back in her very sweet, gentle way, and she said, well, yes, it is true that now, because at this point, Unity Village, they had bought Unity Farm, and she and Charles were living at Unity Farm. She was probably in her 50s or 60s by this point, living in a beautiful house at Unity Village that is called the Arches. It's still being used as a residence. And yeah, she did have help because she was busy running Silent Unity or working with Charles to teach and to write and to speak. But she says in this response to this correspondent, she says, but do you know, one of my very favorite things is to get up from the table at the end of a meal and carry away the dishes and make a nice hot suds and wash all of the dishes and then dry them and put them lovingly back in the cupboard where they belong. That gave her a feeling of serenity, of order, of having done something to contribute. I like that idea of the nice hot suds, and to me, that's a really good analogy for meditation. If getting into the silence is something that you find challenging at times.